photo myths, we've all encountered them. We hear things like you always have to use the rule of thirds, or that gear doesn't matter, or gear does matter.
Bigger sensors are better than smaller sensors.
We want to set a lot of this straight, and I kind of had the realization that a ton of this stuff is really confusing, because we've recently taken up golf, and then we go on YouTube and we try to figure out which clubs we need or what we should be doing. And
golf YouTube is a nightmare.
But every time
so is photography YouTube. That's what I realized.
I know, and every time I watch it, I think of this channel and I'm like, am I answering the questions properly? So I'm hoping that today we answer some questions and we clear up some confusion.
Yeah, well, there's misinformation out there. We're going to directly address some important misinformation, but first we want to tell you about our sponsor, Squarespace.
Yeah, whether you need your own website, store, portfolio, you can make it happen with Squarespace, and it's really easy to do. You can drag and drop. You can build something in like 20 minutes, and you can try it for free if you don't believe me. There's a free trial, and then you can use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. So go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and use the coupon code Chelsea.
Thanks, Chelsea.
You're welcome.
Can I tell you the story of a dentist who wrote me?
You are obsessed with dentists, but...
So many photographers are dentists, but they also spend the most money because they make a good living, right? This dentist had bought a Canon 1D series camera a few years ago in the DSLR era. It was because it was the most expensive camera. He bought the top of the line camera.
Smart.
And then he went out with one of his friends from his camera shooting club, and his friend was using a much cheaper camera, and his friend was getting sharper results than this guy's Canon 1D. And he didn't understand. He bought the most expensive camera. Why wasn't it the best? And I told him, you bought a sports camera. It is better at sports, but decidedly worse at things like landscapes and portraits. People don't understand that spending more money does not get you progressively better pictures. Some cameras are specialized for individual niches.
Yeah, and I know that that's confusing, but when you're deciding which camera to get, you don't just have to buy the most expensive one, even though they can be great. So like, for example, I shoot with the Sony Alpha 1, and it's an amazing camera. It's top of the line. It is very expensive, but I'm shooting wildlife where the 30 frames per second make a huge difference, and the really good auto-focusing system makes a big difference. I'm not saying you need those things to shoot wildlife, but it's helpful, and this is my job, so that's what I get. But if you watch my review and see that it's great, you might be tempted to get it if you do something like landscapes, and then you're really not going to benefit from the super high frames per second. And the autofocus probably isn't going to mean anything to you, so you're spending money on features that you don't need. So when you're trying to buy a camera, you should be figuring out what you're using it for. It can be general purpose. You're a beginner, you're taking pictures of everything, or it could be wildlife and sports where you'll need the high frames per second and good autofocus. Or it could be portraits where maybe you want, more dynamic range, more resolution. You have to decide the tool that you want based on your needs, not the price.
We just compared the Canon R5 to the R5 Mark II, and the results showed that most people probably going to be a little happier with the original R5, unless you're shooting sports or wildlife.
Yeah.
Even though it's much, much cheaper. That's great news, but it is counterintuitive.
And you can also buy used gear and put your budget in other places, so you don't have to get the most expensive camera. Kit lenses are never super sharp.
No, get rid of those.
So if you're putting your whole budget in and only getting a kit lens, you're not even going to be appreciating the full value of your camera. Like, save room in your budget for a decent lens, even if it's used. A light could really help more in portraits than having the latest and the greatest camera. So think about how to allocate your budget in a way that's going to work for you.
Ken Rockwell kind of became famous for saying that P mode is for pros, the PASM dial that sets the mode.
P is for pros.
And then everybody got mad at him because they said, no, manual mode is what the professionals use.
No, the internet took a title and misinterpreted it and then waged a war on one man for no reason. I can't relate to that. No, but that is something that you hear, is that you're not good unless you shoot in manual mode. I kind of know where that comes from. You definitely want to know the relation between your aperture, your shutter speed, your ISO. That can help you take pictures. We have videos on that, but it's not necessary all of the time to shoot in M mode.
Okay, well, of the working pros how many of them are using M mode with manual ISO when they're out doing their professional shoots?
I literally don't even know, because everybody works differently.
Everybody works differently, but most of the ones I know, they're using some form of auto exposure, including myself. Unless I'm in the studio manually controlling strobes, then I'm full manual. But if I'm at an event, if I'm doing wildlife photography extremely complex, I want that auto exposure because it can adjust instantly when the sun goes behind a cloud. It's got me. I don't have to be paying attention to that, and that means I can focus on the subject. It's easy as a photographer to become overloaded. It should be a creative art, not a technical science. So if the camera can handle the technical parts of getting the lighting right, please take that off my head.
Yeah, but have you ever seen the wildlife photographers that used to shoot film? And now they're just like, it's so automatic for them to shoot manual. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I don't know how they do that because you're tracking a flying bird. It'll be in full sun and then it will go into the shade. Or you'll be photographing a crow and then you're shooting a white bird. And you have to manually adjust the exposure in that split second when a subject comes up and is flying through your field of view. I don't think that's humanly possible.
Well, I mean, obviously they get really good results from it, but it's not necessary anymore.
Yeah.
And you should know the relationship between those three things, but it doesn't mean that you're not good if you're not shooting in manual mode.
Let's talk about everybody's favorite compositional trick.
The rule of thirds.
Yeah.
I recommend it. We have a book
Good to know.
called Stunning Digital Photography, and we take you through the basics of photography through more advanced techniques. But one of the first things that we start with is the rule of thirds because it's like a really easy compositional technique. And I think it's not just about the composition, it's about getting you to think about how you're composing a photo rather than just snapping a shot.
All of this is true, but
Yeah.
especially myself included, when I was a beginner, I read about the rule of thirds and I just started putting everything 1/3 of the way through the frame because it is called the rule of thirds.
And if you
Not
don't-
a sometimes think about being off center kind of thing, but the rule of thirds. And I think it's just largely wrong. I think nowadays, especially in the era of small screens and social media, I think you're generally better mostly filling the frame with your subject, as opposed to trying to line it up with some imaginary grid. Just try to use the entire frame so that your subject is as big as possible.
What if you have a horizon in the photo? Don't you put it towards the lower third?
Is the horizon your subject? I mean, think about where your subject is and arrange your subject and stop thinking about the horizon or the rule of thirds. I think most people think about it too much.
I actually disagree a little bit. I think that the rule of thirds is really helpful because it gets you thinking about your composition. It's always nice to put a horizon in like the lower upper third, but I think it's important to remember that it's one compositional technique. So you can leave a ton of space. You can go dead center, like Tony said, or fill the frame, but there's more than just one compositional technique, and you can study the other ones. I still use the rule of thirds all the time.
Oh, really? So antiquated.
You can look at our portfolios on our Squarespaces and tell us which one has better photos. Tony, what's your...
Oh my God. Well, okay, I'll take this challenge. I'm northropphotography.com.
I'm chelseanorthrop.com, I think, but I forgot.
No, that's correct.
And you can get your own custom domain if you use our sponsor, Squarespace. That's what we use for ours. And it makes finding your photos easy, but also you can arrange them in a way where you're showing people your favorite work first instead of chronologically, like on social media. And also they're not getting inundated with ads for other people or other things. They're just seeing your work, your contacts, your contracts, everything that you need to know to get customers or having them buy your work. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea. Try out the free trial. You don't have to remember to cancel. And when you love it, which I know you will, get the coupon code Chelsea to save 10%. And once again, don't forget I made a challenge for no reason to compare me and Tony and my rule of thirds.
Okay, well, write a comment and let us know who wins this challenge.
Just say me. Here is a little myth. Bigger sensors are better.
Oh my God. Everybody attributes this to me specifically for some reason. Like you and I together worked out crop factor and made several videos about it early in our careers. And understanding the relationship between sensor size and things like the amount of background blur you get, the amount of noise you get in our images, all that information allowed us to then shoot on micro four thirds gear with its smaller sensors for about half of our entire YouTube career.
Yeah.
We used that information to get the most out of small sensors. And that's what crop factor was supposed to teach. But for some reason, what everybody remembered was bigger sensors are better. No, it's not. It's a combination of the lens and the sensor, and you have to consider both of those things.
I've noticed that people like to take you out of context and then disagree with stuff you never said.
Right. The straw man argument is extremely popular on the internet, especially when the real answer requires a lot of complexity and subtlety. People like to skip over that, jump to some simple conclusion, and then be mad at that. But I will say, though, in 2024, full-frame sensors are kind of where it's at, but there are bigger sensors. Medium format sensors don't necessarily produce better results than full-frame sensors. Full-frame sensors are kind of in the lead, in my opinion, because they have the most lenses. It's really about the lenses. We could do just as well with Micro Four Thirds sensors if they would make similar equivalent lenses, but for the most part, they don't exist. So I always say, don't pick a camera and then pick your lenses to fit that. Like, pick your lenses first, knowing the results you can get, and then pick the camera body that suits those lenses best.
I'm trying, in my mind, I'm like converting this to golf advice to try to think about how much we're confusing people, and you just brought up crop factor without explaining what it is.
I know,
And
well, it is so technical, and that's the biggest challenge about it. Yeah.
I guess what we're saying is, if you think bigger sensors are better, it's not necessarily true. If you can get a good deal on a camera with a smaller sensor, that's fine. You shouldn't be just exclusively looking at that. And you could look up our crop sensor video if you want, crop factor.
I will also add, smartphones have the ultimate small sensors, tiny little sensors.
They
But
also have a ton of like processing power and AI and
right, well, they can use computational photography, and that helps them overcome the limitations of the sensor side. So I don't think the idea that bigger sensors are always better is true at all.
it's a myth.
But unfortunately, the answer is much more complex than that and would require an hour tutorial to really cover in any sort of detail.
This is why people just take
So that
one.
starts right now.
No.
First, let's talk about crop factor. No.
I think, yeah, you tend to have a long explanation, so anyone can pick any 3 words out and just pretend.
It's easier than listening to my whole explanation. I'll acknowledge that.
I'm going to start doing that too. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, here's another myth I think a lot of beginners have. I had it. More drama equals better photos. So, you know, when you're on your photo journey and like you get a picture and then you want to add a sunset and then there's a bird flying through the sunset and then there's like a goose in a hat and then you have to add like a puddle
HDR.
with a reflection and then throw some HDR on that and a couple filters on top and whoa. And we see this a lot, like this, and there are beautiful photos, you know, where the saturation is really high and they're super dramatic, but that's not necessary to get a great photo. And I think sometimes we can lose sight about what does make a good photo, and that's human connection, emotion, and mood, and storytelling. So if you can't get out in the fjords of Norway and take the most dramatic photo in the world with an orca jumping or whatever, you don't have to worry about it. If you can get a moment with a beautiful composition, light, and pure human emotion and connection, you can get a great photo. So I feel like I have to throw that out there.
It's about the subject, right? More
Yeah.
than anything else, it's the subject you're taking a picture of. A picture of your puppy that you love is going to make people happier than the most beautiful sunset picture of some faraway place that they'll never visit.
Well, I think not only just that, I think sometimes we get into just showing people things like, this is a cool house I saw, this is a cool sunset I saw. But what about expressing an idea or making a point? And being able to tell a story in photos is super important. So if you can have an original idea and then convey it symbolically in a photo or tell a story with a few elements in a photo, then you're already way further ahead than the person that's just technically taking a good picture. It's just something to consider. I love when I see a picture and I'm like, whoa, they're trying to make a statement. Like, that's so much cooler than just, you know, something glossy to me.
This next one has come up a few times when we were doing photo shoots for, we'll call them non-photographers. They'll get into the photo shoot and then something will go wrong. And they'll say, well, we'll just fix it in Photoshop. The baby will have cheese powder from Cheetos on its face and they'll say, just Photoshop it out. Their shirt won't be ironed. They'll be like, just Photoshop it out. Fix it in Photoshop, right?
I used to think I could just Photoshop anything. And so I would be taking pictures and I would think those things like, I'll just Photoshop out wrinkles, or I'll just Photoshop out this, that, wrinkles on clothing, or this, that, and the other. And then you get into Photoshop and you're like, okay, maybe it's technically possible, but I don't have that skill level. And if I did, it would take 3 hours. And so,
The worst is you get like that single strand of hair that goes over your portrait subject's like eye, and you don't notice it when you're shooting, and then you have to go back and try to like clone that one thing out. Like I think the lesson I'm saying is, when you're in that situation and you see something went wrong in your photo shoot, usually it's better to fix it and reshoot, like right on the spot. And that's why you need to check your pictures carefully. Do not rely on post-processing too much because it's never going to be as good.
yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I like to zoom in and look all around at the pictures. And sometimes you'll see in the background of maybe a family portrait, there's like some guy flying a kite that you don't want in there. And you can just simply shift everyone a little bit to get them out of the background. Yeah, inspect your photo. If you can fix anything during the photo shoot, do it. If you have to fix it in Photoshop, then I guess that's a learning opportunity or a different editing software. This is just a few of our tips. If you have other ones, mistakes you've made or things you've had to learn the hard way, you can put them in the comments and we can help the beginners or the intermediate photographers learn things without having to go through all the struggle. I know you had a few more you wanted to add, but we felt like we would be here all day.
Well, you know, I get particularly outraged when there's any kind of misinformation being spread
I know.
around.
Just go make like a 3-hour rant and everyone can misquote you and write an article about something you never said.
Sounds accurate.
Okay. You know what? A mistake that you don't have to make is showing your work in a way that's professional and beautiful. And you can do that with Squarespace. And it's easy. So I have client galleries on there. I have a gallery where you can buy my prints. And also I just show off all of the different photos that I like to take, whether it be cars, portraits, whatever. So go to squarespace.com/Chelsea, try it out, and when you get your very own, get the coupon code Chelsea to save 10%. Thanks, Squarespace.
My portfolio, I focused on making the images like big and easy to access.
Yeah.
So it's mostly just a single page, but whether you're using a computer or a phone or a tablet or whatever, they look way better than they do on social media, and in fact, way better than your site.
Yeah.
northropphotography.com. Obviously superior to chelseanorthrop.com. And if you agree with me, write a comment down below and say that. And if you don't agree with me, like no need to spend any additional time writing a comment.
Yeah.
Feel free to just move on with your life.
I just feel like as a person with simple taste, I could see how you would think that. So I'm sure these sophisticated people will correct you. Thanks for watching the Picture This Photography podcast. And it's available wherever podcasts are available. So you can check that out, give us a like. And we'd appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Bye.